So a customer contacts me and asks me if I'd be prepared to make something special, a special Christmas present for her hubby. You see, hubby's deeply into playing pool, plays at competition level and county level, I believe. The man has more than a few skills, and as such uses the pool cue case constantly and has effectively killed the poor thing. So she's come up with this idea of having one made specially for him as a Christmas present, and I really like the idea, so I said yes. So Katie, my customer, has left all of the design decisions up to me. I've got totally blank canvas. The only thing set in stone, or pre-decided if you like, are the internal measurements, as the case needs to be able to accommodate 2 pool cues and some chalk at one end. So I've decided to go with this beautiful piece of ash. So I'm going to start by slicing off a 90mm piece, and then I'll cut 30mm off of this bottom end. Now the resultant 60mm piece I'm going to slice down into 3 pieces, just over 11.5mm. It's about 45mm thick in total. I want 3 pieces after that. Now you may be thinking to yourself, my gosh Graham, that blade's smoking a bit, and you're dead right. It is more than a pack of sausages on a summer's barbecue. It's a 48 tooth multi-purpose blade, fairly fine cut, but it's supposed to be capable of ripping as well, according to the manufacturer Hammer Felder statement on their website. I'm not so keen actually. I may change the blade in a tick. With the ash cut to size for the sides of the cue case, I now need to turn my attention to the top and bottom, and for that I'm going to use this lovely sapele that I picked up from Dovetail Timber. I'll put a link to that video below and to their website for you. Cracking place, check them out. So this piece is got a little bit of rough sawn finish on one side, and there's also a little bit of a twist in it, but I've got more than enough timber to plane that out. This is over 50mm thick, and I only need 30mm, so I'll cut it down to over length again, 1.6 meters, plane it at the twist, and then once again slice it to slightly over width and slightly over the 10mm and the 20mm piece I want for the bottom and the top respectively. So I'm going to pre-sand these pieces to 180 grit before I start cutting the joinery. And as for the joinery, I've not mentioned that yet, have I? I'm going to use dovetailed splined mitre joints. So now it's decision time. Which piece is the front, which is the back, and which is the outside, and which is the inside. I really like this piece. So I'm going to have that as the front, outside, and if that's going that way up, then that needs to go that way up. So that's going to be back, outside, and I'm going to be cutting them with the outside facing me. And then this piece, I will take the right hand side out of this section here, and the left hand side, where it's much clearer, out of this section here. So to ensure I get true mitres on these rather thin, unwieldy pieces of ash, I need to make sure that the workpiece is clamped securely to the fence of the mitre saw right next to the blade. So in order to achieve that, I've made myself up a little jig using the match fit dovetail clamp system. Fantastic system. I did a review video on it quite a while ago. I'll put a link to that below. So the jig itself is clamped in place using the festool jig clamp that's connected to the bed itself, and then I can just drop my workpiece in and clamp it nice and tightly to that fence, using those micro jig clamps, dovetail clamps, and everything should be hunky-dory. Perfect, in want of a better word. So I'm going to cut one mitre on each of the long pieces, and then I'll measure the length, flip them over, set an end stop, and cut the 2 mitres so that I can ensure both pieces are exactly the same length. Now I'm going to use the masking tape trick to glue these up, as you'd expect, but because they're so long I can't do the whole thing in one hit. So I'm going to glue a side piece on to each long piece. And I'm going to make sure that stays at 90 with one of these little wonderful little woodpecker squares. And to cut the splines, I'm going to use my router and this rudimentary jig. It's evolved a little bit since version 1 actually. I think this is version 3 already. But the piece itself slides in there. It gets held with this cross piece in place. And I use these 2 sliders so that I can take it out, flip it over and cut all the left-hand pieces. Adjust and cut the right hand splines, and to make sure the router stays in exactly the right place, I've got these 2 guide rails at the front that keep it perfectly aligned. It's a bit of a bind having to take the clamping piece completely out every time. But at the moment, I can't come up with a better idea. Any suggestions? Answers on a postcard, please. Not too bad. I'll cut the base of the box next, or rather the Q case. I've cut a lovely clean 90° on one end, and I'm just going to dress the box on top of the base, mark it, cut it to length with the mitre saw, and then run it down to the exact width on the table saw. Now I can glue it in place, clamp it, and while I'm waiting for the glue to go off, I can cut the splines. While I'm waiting for the glue to dry on the base, I'm going to cut the splines. I've got a piece of sapele that I've run down to about 12mm, and I'm going to run it through the router table using exactly the same dovetail bit. I'm going to take a very similar approach with the sapele for the lid section, except this time I'm going to cut it to exactly the same dims as the outside of the box, and then I'm going to cut a rebate all the way around it so that half of the lid section sits inside. It's a 20mm thick piece, so 10mm inside and then 10mm protruding from the outside, because I want to try and give it that rounded feel. I'll cut off the excess from the sapele spline stick that I made earlier. Then I can chop them all down into smaller pieces on the chop saw. and then a little bit of glue and pop them in. I'll cut the excess timber off from my Dovetail splines using a flush cut saw, and I'm going to be using the back of my Shinwa 150mm rule. Incidentally, the best rule I've ever bought. Check it out, I'll put a link below. I'm going to use the rule just as a standoff to make sure that I don't scar the surface of the box. Then I'll just sand off the little nib that's left with a bit of 180 grit. And now to give the top of the lid that rounded over feeling. And to do that, I'm going to use this router bit. Absolutely massive round over bit. It's sold as a table edge round over bit. I'll put a link to it below. It came from Infinity Tools. Absolutely huge. Just fits in my router table. So I've got the bearing lined up with my fence. And I'm going to take really small passes. Two reasons. Number one, I don't want tear out, and number two, I don't want to overload the bit. Just before I cut the one into two, I'm going to give it a sand all over with 180 grit. I've got a couple of extra sponge bases on my little palm sander, just so that I can ensure I don't put any flat spots on that lovely round over. Where's my bloody pencil gone? For God's sake. And now for the most critical cut of the project, arguably slicing the top from the bottom, making it into something usable. Even though I'm going to be running it alongside the fence, I still want a pencil line in place. So I've got a visual guide as well as a physical guide with the fence, and that way if anything starts to go awry, then I can stop the cut and scream and cry and figure out what I'm going to do. So the cuts come out pretty well in the main. I'll see if I can spin the camera for you and show you the entire length. Little gap in at that end. So I'm gonna sand. And seeing as I've got this incredible sander in the workshop, I'm gonna use it because it's the longest, flattest piece of sandpaper I own. So my next job is to lay out the internal of the Q case. I need a 30mm space at this end for the chalk. Then I've got a divider which should leave me 149 on the button. Look, there's lucky. 149 centimeters for the actual cues, and then I'm going to make a mark 150mm in from each end of the cue space, and another mark dead center, and that's where I'm going to put my cue holders. Katie was most insistent that I put a little roundover on the corners, so I've got a tiny little 3mm, actually it might even be a 2.3mm roundover bit from Axminster that'll just take that edge off. So I'm going to seal the inside of the box before I do anything else, in particular before I fit the hinges. I'm going to be using 8mm barrel hinges, and as I'm sure you're aware, it's a very exacting fit in the hole, so I don't want any finish going into the hole. The bottom of the box is going to be lined, but I still want some finish on there first so that it's all sealed, every edge sealed. So I'm going to fit 4 8mm barrel hinges to make sure the lid is fully supported, and I'm going to come in 125mm from each end and then equidistant in between those two marks in the middle. Use my marking gauge to make sure I get dead center, because I've only got 1mm each side to play with. What's really important is that all of the hinges are exactly the same distance from the back edge, so I'm going to drill the holes on the drill press and set my fence and depth appropriately, but I just want these little marks in there again so I've got a visual indication of whether I'm in the right place or not. So for the finish, I'm using my absolute favourite Polyvine heavy duty floor varnish. And even though it says floor varnish on the label, you should absolutely feel free to use it on anything you darn well want, because it's fantastic. Really easy to apply. Brush, rag. Not sure if you can spray it or not. Doesn't say whether you can spray it or not, but I wouldn't have thought there'd be a problem. Recoatable in 1 to 2 hours, depending on ambient temperature. And once it's dry, it is absolutely rock hard, as you'd expect from a floor varnish. Doesn't yellow, but allows the grain to shine beautifully. I'll leave a link to it down below in the description. Not the cheapest on the market, but it does go a really long way, so maybe it is a good price. And 3 coats with a little D-nib in between. I always put the first coat on, water down a little bit, and I find using a cloth gives you the best finish. Yes, I forgot to record it, but I've engraved the chap's name on the lid in a nice scripty font, so it kind of looks signed, just to take it up that extra notch, you know. You can see why Sapele used to be so popular, can't you? Look at that. Beautiful. Beautiful wood. I was going to use self-adhesive foam strip, but it looks terrible, so I've fallen back on more of the baize. I think it's a good call, actually. Colour coordination. I'll try and do a walk round with the camera, but I'm not sure how stable a hand I've got. Here it goes. And that's it. Last order for Christmas going out the door. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching and hope to see you next time. Ta-ra.